In this episode of the AI Take by 1KE, we examine whether it's time to switch to open source models. Are open models now good enough and cheap enough to displace the hosted frontier APIs, or do their apparent savings disappear once you look at quality, rework, and some of the operating costs?
Welcome to the AI Take, powered by 1KE, where in each episode we take one AI lesson and explore why it matters to you and your business. I'm Sydney from Sydney, and as always, I'm joined by Michael Chanter, CEO of 1KE. Michael, good to see you.
Thanks, Sid.
Tell us, what's today's AI Take?
So today's take is it time to switch to an open source model?
Ooh, is the answer now yes?
Well, it probably doesn't surprise you to know that the answer is it depends.
Of course.
But I would say open source models are now definitely credible enough that this is something that businesses should be considering. But they've also got to be careful that switching everything could create alternative problems.
It wasn't long ago that people weren't taking this seriously, like the open source option. Why is this now a serious option?
Well, I think realistically, when you look at new model releases like Kimi K3 recently, and Inkling, they're only really N-1 relative to the frontier models. So if you're using, GPT 5.6, K3 is probably a 5.5 equivalent. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it from that perspective, and then of course the economics, it becomes something that users are considering seriously. Just to give it a little bit more context, Vercel, which is one of the key gateways for a lot of code running AI, is now running about 20% of their workloads via open source at about 3% of the cost. So a big variability there.
Okay, but I don't think it would work for all workloads right now. What are some of the potential upper bound and lower bound mistakes that we could make trying to do this?
Yeah, so I think really you're right in sort of couching in those terms, upper bound, lower bound. The way I sort of contemplate it is that upper bound mistake would be using frontier models for every task. You don't need that absolute top end capability for every task, obviously.
Like Sledgehammer to put in a little nail for hanging up a photo of Granny.
Yeah, I mean, but both in terms of time and cost, obviously.
Yes.
But of course, the lower bound mistake is assuming that open or free means cheapest overall. So the lower bound is not choosing because of the task, but assuming that it's always going to be cheaper. So open really only wins when it sort of stays above the quality floor that you need for a given task, but below the cost ceiling.
So we've been told to go and adopt this AI thing, which we are, sort of, maybe. Now there's a potential switch. How should organizations think about switching to this sort of hybrid approach, if that's the right term to use for it?
I think it's actually a good term. So the key is to do it on a workload basis. So I wouldn't, for example, suggest you shift everything to open source. I think that's a mistake. You should move workloads, test open models on real inputs and outputs, and check those against the failure modes that you already have in place. But start where volume is high, because you're going to get by far the best economic benefit out of that. So if you can do high volume, easy to review, where you can recover from the errors if there's a problem, I think those are good cases where you could make an enormous economic returns from doing it.
Okay, so when should the workload stay on a closed frontier model?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the Vercel example I mentioned earlier, What they noticed was that the open models took a lot of volume, but end users were still using Anthropic, which is obviously one of the core frontier models for high stakes or high complexity tasks, right? So there's value in maintaining those frontier models for tasks that are either extremely complex or where an error is expensive because you're paying for the capabilities. But really only pay for that where that converts into value. That's the point.
Okay, so what does this shift mean for our loving technology channel?
I think for the technology channel, when you're building for your customers using AI particularly, the key thing you need to be thinking is how easily can you shift models within the workflows? This is a theme that we've picked up in other conversations, but model portability is going to be critical because customers will need to be able to bank that economic value over time. And something that today might need a frontier model in a month could well be addressed by an open source model.
Got it. I think this is an interesting topic today, like every week, but today's one was sort of intriguing. So what is the one thing we want people to take away from today's lesson?
So I think the key here is open source models are now becoming really viable alternatives, but it's not always the best choice. For the high stakes choices, frontier models probably still the way to go, but don't forget that it's going to be difficult. There's going to be some difficulty around hosting and managing open source. So they're not automatically cheaper.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's it for today's AI Take. If you found it useful, please subscribe and follow our channels and share this episode with someone who'll get value from it. We'll be back next week to explore yet another AI lesson and break down why it matters to you and your business.